Hello, everyone. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. We're glad that you've tuned in. A few things we wanted to tell you at the beginning of the show, and that's this podcast was created to be a tool to help you, primarily to discover and grow your EQ. Science and our own lived experiences confirm that the better we are at managing our emotions, the better we're going to be at making decisions, which leads to a better life. And that's something we all want. We're glad that you've taken out the time today to listen and hope that something that you hear will lead to a breakthrough. Hey, one last thing. We'd really appreciate a review on whichever platform you use to listen. And if you want to, leave some comments about what you heard today, as well as follow and subscribe. That way you won't miss a single episode as we continue this journey. And with that, the show begins. Stephanie Matthews, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Eric. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh my gosh, I've been waiting and wanting to do this like forever. Life events, as you are aware, that kind of conspired against us, but here we are. It's December 2024, and we're going to get it done. So, A Tribe for Jazz. And for our audience, all that information about A Tribe for Jazz is in the show notes. I want to start there. Can you maybe tell the audience, what is A Tribe for Jazz?
So we're a 501c3 nonprofit.
Okay. Yep.
We're 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Our anniversary will be in April 25 or before then.
Okay.
The mission is to preserve the legacy and advance the future of jazz. And we do that a number of ways, through visual storytelling, live and virtual performances, education, and community engagement. And so how those kind of break out is the visual storytelling aspect is like the cinematic performance film we did when we first launched called Legacy John Arabagon.
Okay.
And, and that, we send that to like film festivals and it toured all around the world. And so we're very interested in, creativity in that way, storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
The performances are like our Columbus International Jazz Series.
That was in the summertime primarily?
It started in April, which
Okay.
was Jazz Appreciation Month, and actually ran through October.
Okay, got it.
And this year we were really blessed to bring in 15 really high level, incredible national and international jazz musicians, high level improvisers, quartets and trios, and it was really dynamic. And that was a partnership we did with CCAD
Mm-hmm.
as well as Columbus Dance Theater. And, we like to move jazz around to different locations and bring it to different people.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the education side, how can we use jazz as a catalyst, jazz music as a catalyst to impact education, STEM or social emotional learning?
Mm-hmm.
And we have a number of programs in that space and then finally community engagement. And that's all the partnerships that we do. We have wonderful, wonderful partners, and I'm not going to even name everybody, but they're pretty dynamic and I think high level for an organization like ours that's 3 years old.
Well, I'll say for our audience, and it'll be sort of to hit your memory, I was invited to a tabletop, I call it a tabletop discussion, but I think it was called Dynamic Dialogues or something,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it was this thing about EQ and AI. I think that was the
one.
the subject,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And a friend in common had sent me a note on LinkedIn and said, "I think this is right up your alley." So the EQ thing, yeah, okay, because we get those requests and blah blah blah. But then I go, A Tribe for Jazz. Oh my gosh, yes, I'll be there, right?
Yeah.
And that just fascinated me. So I'm going to use that as a lead-in, Stephanie. Some out there may say, "Why'd you pick jazz? Why not Latin music or rock music?" Or I have some selfish reasons why I think you chose jazz, but I told you before we started recording, I'm gonna be very gentle that way. But
Sure.
Why jazz? What is it about jazz?
So, I was brought into the organization as their executive director, and when I joined, I actually brought the visual storytelling component to the mission. We changed it at that point and really started to build out what A Tribe for Jazz is. The president and founder, Bruce, is heavy jazz man like yourself.
Okay.
And his interest was in presenting musicians that the Columbus market did not normally get. It's outside of the standard songbook. It's outside of the smooth jazz that might happen during Jazz and Rib Fest.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it's just a completely different sound. Now, I'd always been a fan of jazz, you know, growing up in my grandmother's house, mom and my mom's house, dad's house. And I played a trumpet, and I picked up the trumpet because of my love for Louis Armstrong. And then my brother picked up the trumpet for his love also. And, you know, I took that through like senior in high school. But so we've always had jazz in our blood. So for me, coming on board the organization was kind of a no-brainer. And I really liked the idea that we were going to be doing some outside of the box type of things and programming. Bruce, the founder, he's one of those swing for the fences guys, and I'm down with that because that's exactly how I move. You know, so we think of ourselves, even though we're, you know, a jazz nonprofit, we think of ourselves as very agile. We think of ourselves as innovators and very forward thinking and different from what the market has to offer.
Well, I would definitely say you're different, and I say that with the greatest of compliment because when I tell people about, and I have been, you know, it's this, hey, I got to tell you about this organization called A Tribe for Jazz. Immediately I get the, what is that?
It's a great name, right?
You know,
I
it
know.
is. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, it pulls you in and makes you want to learn more. In the selfish side of me goes, what I love about the mission is that there's so much to jazz that I think it goes beyond when people hear the famous names, right? Louis Armstrong. Our audience knows Miles Davis as from my lips, as Jeff laughs, right? We connotate so much of it that way. But I haven't told you this, Stephanie. It was in August. We were on vacation, and I get your emails, you know, announcing things. And there was this artist, and I don't remember her name. I think she was a pianist. And I typically will click on them, but for some reason I say, you know, I just want to hear what her, and I'm listening to her, and I'm going, oh my gosh, and I'm scrambling, and I'm going, sorry, dude, you're in Seattle, you ain't going to make that show, but oh my goodness, and I never heard of her. I mean, and I would imagine she probably has a following and all, but so the fact that you guys are willing to not sort of balance it on we need famous and the notoriety.
That part, right.
You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And I think you're talking about Miki Yamanaka. Does that name sound right? We had her here. It was in the summer. July,
it was late.
August.
It was late
a little
summer.
later.
Yeah.
I have to look at the calendar, but it sounds like that was probably Miki.
She's a pianist.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then, that's got to be her.
Pianist,
yes.
And,
that is her. That is her. Yep.
Yeah, and she is incredible. So the thing is, the type of artists that we focus on featuring are high-level improvisers, very well respected in their field in within jazz. They may not be the household names, but they do have a following
within that community.
Yes, absolutely. These are the rising stars of jazz. Yeah. That's the thing. They're the rising stars. You're going to find them in like the downbeat polls. You're going to find them in jazzes. You're going to find them, you know, in all those places. Those names, they're going to pop up, but they may not be like, you know, the big
as we would say.
Names,
And I know that's somewhat relative because obviously jazz is not as mainstream as, you know, Taylor Swift and fill in the blank. And actually, part of me goes, I'm glad because I think oftentimes the commercialism of music has really, really tainted its value. Again, my opinion. So, Jeff, I'm going to give you an opportunity because I got a ton here for you, Stephanie.
No, the more I hear about your organization, the more I love it because I totally agree that the idea of music in developing, especially young people, is so misunderstood and not emphasized enough. Because Eric and I have talked about this before. It does so many things to people's brains, and gives them something that's creative. And I'm just really happy about that. Like I said before, I'm not the jazz person that Eric is. I'm more rock, but that's just who I am. And I follow two two groups that are all young ladies,
Mm-hmm.
the Lindas and the Warning.
Oh.
And I love the idea of what they're doing. The Lindas aren't out of high school yet.
Wow.
But the idea that they've been encouraged, and I see that what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing is the same thing, and it just makes me very happy to see things like that going on. I guess.
Well, if young people, in my mind, can escape, maybe is the word, or be careful with this obsession with celebrity and fame and fortune,
Mm-hmm.
and allow music to do what it can do,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
And I'll draw a conclusion from personal life. There was an interview with Bill Evans, the famous jazz pianist, right?
Whom I love.
Oh my gosh! And they were asking him about why did he leave space between notes? You know, how he would play a note and it would hold.
Yeah.
And he said, because it's the anticipation of what could come next,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Personal life. Counselor says to my wife and I, and you know about this part of my personal life, the difficulty that this subject matter, but he said, be careful with trying to fill up every space with words. Maybe think about using less and let the space have its moment.
Yes.
And you know what, Stephanie, I'm going, I think maybe he and Bill Evans could have had a conversation about what music, and in this case, jazz, can have an impact on life, because not every kid, Jeff, right, is going to be in a band that's going to go on to record and will tour and on and on and on. But if they can understand, you should be in this band because it's going to impact how you live life. That's where it gets really powerful, at least in my head, right? I want us to use that same point and go into the societal problems that we face.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Hold that thought, because I want to comment on something that Jeff was saying. So you had mentioned about the benefits of jazz music. And jazz music, I think it's important to say, has a significant number of benefits, neurologically, physiologically, even passive listening. You know, people don't think about it from the research aspect, and this is one of the things that we're trying to draw out in our work as we're making these connections to, you know, different areas of, you know, different sectors. And so, I mean, people don't think, you know, oh, I'm going to use jazz for, like, you know, social emotional wellness or emotional wellness, but you absolutely can, because it can help, like, foster creativity and innovation. It can help unlock emotions. It can help reduce anxiety and blood pressure. It can help trigger memories for people who are, you know, in the who may have dementia and struggle with areas like that. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later some more. But I'm just saying, I mean, that's the other thing too. Kids don't even know the value of just passively listening to it. It's activating neurons.
Well, I don't know if I like the term passively, and I like actively listening to it.
Okay, but I'm saying, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But what I'm saying is if somebody has it on in the background while they're doing homework,
Okay, that, yeah.
I'm saying it's just on, or if you're in a cafe and there's jazz music playing, you're getting the benefits and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean about the passive listening. I also prefer active listening, because then you can embody the music more.
But you
Even
know
if you
what,
don't
though?
understand it,
But you
it
know
can
what?
just let it soak in and let it wash through you. So
Stephanie, the first book I wrote was heavily influenced by listening passively to Sketches of Spain.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
yeah. I mean, I wasn't actively listening, but what I would do is I would put it on because there was something in that would just get my creativity flowing so I could get into my flow.
Yes.
I wouldn't have been able to tell you, oh, yeah, that's Blues for Pablo, and he's playing with, no, I put it on because I wanted it to act, and it's still to this day. If I want to do really focused work, that's the type of music that I'll go to because
Bingo.
of that activation piece.
Yep.
And Jeff, to your point, active listening, absolutely. Because
It was funny because you mentioned the one piano player that left space. I just re-listened to The Dark Side of the Moon.
oh,
They leave lots of holes in that album.
I'm sorry. Everybody out there knows how much I love Miles Davis, so this is not going to be a shock when I go there. The keyboardist, Richard Wright. And for our audience, if we've butchered his name, don't hold it against us. We'll get it right in the show notes. However, I was watching a video, and he was talking about the song Breathe. And what part of that song was taken from was a Miles Davis cut off of Kind of Blue. And he goes through this process, Stephanie and Jeff, of where he goes, well, I could have done this and had this, but then I decided after listening to that, I would include this. And you hear the song and you go, that little change that he made was everything. It wouldn't be the same song without that. And it was right in the beginning. It's just like prompting so many of these things. So good. Come back out of my rabbit hole. So the active listening, obviously, really, really important and powerful. But I also think, to your point, the idea of using it as a passive tool to foster more creativity, I'm an example that yes, you are very right on that.
Yeah.
Very right on that. All right. So all of us have got problems personally, and also we got problems collectively. Your organization is also trying to bring this sort of mindset of what we've been talking about to those things too, right? From a community perspective. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Go again. Tell me more.
All right. So I may be missing this, but I want to say I've seen some things from you guys that you've participated in that, well, my gosh, I can go back to the dynamic
dialogues.
All right. I guess I'm seeing this thread, even if it's not some obvious red thread that stands out, but it seems to be weaving throughout these different things, right? Because I know in that discussion, we talked about a lot of really powerful things, and there was some rigorous debate, right?
There was.
But you know what I thought was very powerful is that after it was over, nobody walked out of there like thinking, I never want to sit with that person again. I don't like how they see the world, and I'm out of here. It seemed to be like, wow, let's do this again.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I guess that's where I'm going with this, Stephanie. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not included.
That's very much who we are as an organization. You know, I wanted to put us in the thought leadership space, and that's what led to the collaboration, the partnership with Dennis and Edge. And the dynamic dialogues came out of that.
Yeah.
Which actually was the result of a big table conversation that we did
with the Columbus Foundation.
Yes.
Yeah.
During that whole thing. So no, you're spot on. We're interested in how can jazz, the structure of it, the processes, the transformative experience of listening to it, the just all of it. How can that bring us together? I think that's what you're reading in, when you see our website. It's just really about community building.
Yeah.
And we're just making our way around, kind of like going into this space, moving into this space, and we're making these really interesting connections. On the surface, what does a Tribe for Jazz and Dennis and Edge have to do with one another? Well, for me, I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, we're both interested in innovation. We're both organizations are interested in story and community. So of course there's a tie there. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask, we put a lot of emphasis on the intellectual, the analytical side of things, right? Solving problems through here's the problem, let's develop a solution to fix it, right? And that's good. But I also think that there's an emotional component too that contains mystery, and it because again, I'll go back to the dynamic dialogues discussion. I'm sure if my memory is serving me well, there were times when there was something that was said that made me uncomfortable. And Jeff, past shows, there's this thing about curiosity that helps us navigate uncomfortableness, right? I guess in my mind is that sort of navigating that is not an analytical expedition, it's an emotional one. right?
Yes.
It's kind of that I'm feeling this. What's the message that I'm getting from that? What's the message about me being uncomfortable with what Stephanie said was her opinion of AI versus EQ versus me rushing to judgment and saying, you said something I didn't like, so therefore I don't like you, and then I'm done. I shut down, right? And we were talking about this before we were recording, is this idea that Jung had, that thinking is hard, therefore that's why judgment is so easy. Right? Because when we judge, I can end it quickly and I can get on to the next thing. If I have to think, then I got to go, well, what's Stephanie's perspective that would make her think that way? Where did she come from? What did she struggle with? What did she triumph in? And could that be I need to ask more. I need to understand more before I make a judgment that says I disagree or whatever.
Do you know how scary it is to think sometimes?
Keep going with that, Jeff. What makes it scary?
Because, like you said, if I think about our relationship, this is just an example, and I actually start thinking about it, it can get scary because I may have to like you if I didn't like you before.
Right.
Is that implying that change? I may have to confront.
Yeah, I may have to change me instead of making you fit what I want you to be. And I think that's important to think of it from that way too, because you said judgment is easy, thinking is hard, but I think there's the scary part of it is what makes it the hard part, the hard thing to do.
Do you encounter that?
What part?
The thinking is hard and judgment is easy. And I'm saying that in light of your audience, meaning the businesses that you approach for support, the education centers and all of that.
That's good. I want to make sure I'm hearing you right. Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
ask it again. Ask that part again.
All right. So if judgment is easy and thinking is hard, that's where I'm going. I mean, because I wonder, and maybe you haven't. I obviously, as I've looked at your organization over time, it's successful. You're getting traction with what you're trying to do. So
Absolutely.
there is
Thank
some
you.
level of embrace, right? But I got to believe, Stephanie, there's some people when you say jazz and passive listening to create, I don't like jazz. I don't like it. Oh my gosh.
Okay. So bingo. So to that point.
Okay.
Glad I could help.
How did you do that?
I don't know. That's why I love jazz.
And I'm gonna get to that. I'm gonna circle back because that's it though.
Yeah.
But this is here's the thing that we do.
Yeah.
Jazz for us. Okay, the foundation, the core of it, the catalyst is of course the music. But it's a way of thinking. It's a way of life. It can be a way of being. We have a collaborative and open spirit. And if I could liken it back to that, the dynamic dialogues conversation where you had mentioned, surely there must have been a moment where I felt like, but we set the stage whenever we're doing something by letting it be an open dialogue, thinking about it in terms of how like quartets or trios or quintets, how they interact and collaborate and how they're communicating verbally and non-verbally. And so obviously, like, there are organizations who are like, jazz, it doesn't make sense. It's jazz music, and here we are, and we do this, and that, or whatever. I'm like, but if you look at it, the structure of jazz, if you look at the community and the historicity of jazz, and how it's inclusive, and it's all about access, and it's about bringing people together and having these dialogues and listening, leaving that space, right? We fit anywhere. Jazz fits everywhere.
It's what convinces me why they have you doing what you're doing there, because your ability, your talent of communicating things in that form, that definitely resonates. So when you, I'm going to kind of turn a little bit to the education space. STEM is I think of it in terms that it's more the technology, the science, the research, and that kind of thing. Have you encountered educators that say, "Well, let me get you with our band director," or let me get you in our music department"?
Yes.
The short answer, right?
The short answer is yes.
Yep.
And I'm still working through how I'm feeling about all of that. It's interesting. Okay, so sound, of course, is physics, which is science.
Yep.
Music is sound.
Yeah.
These things fit together, and kind of getting people who were like really thinking people to kind of get that. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. You still see how that,
Mm-hmm.
but no. There are a lot of people who are like, arts, the jazz, it's just arts. And I'm saying, no, it's not. And I'm not alone in this. There are some people, and it's not a lot, but there are a number of people and researchers and whatnot who are saying, no. For me, and thinking about Sketches of Spain and how it was, impacting your brain and firing neurons.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started hearing some of these high-level improvisers that we would be bringing into town, I'm seeing mathematical equations, I'm seeing geometric shapes, I'm seeing colors. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. There is so much more to this. This is science. This is absolutely science. And so, but yeah, I think I'm pretty good at making the argument in the case for how we can we can connect.
And it's also you guys have had some success, so I would imagine being able to bring along those quote case studies to reassure maybe that educator that maybe was either on the fence or had a certain level of skepticism. But what you just put forth is right. There is an interview. It was a blend. He gave a talk and it was a panel discussion with Pat Metheny in this neuroscience conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I highly recommend this. You can find it on YouTube. I typically just type in Pat Metheny neuroscience and it comes up, right?
Yeah.
And he said some very fascinating things about this idea that it is not just an art, right? As you put it. And he even used this example, Stephanie, of you can hear music in things that are non-musical. He said, if I take a trash can from the 4th floor of a building and just push it down the stairs, if you really closely pay attention, you can hear the notes.
The notes. Yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
I put that to the test, and he's right. I didn't do the trash can thing, but it put me in a place of like, I'm going to listen to things that are, quote, non-musical and see if I can pick up a rhythm or a melody or a repetition, right?
You know that I'm a motorhead.
Yep.
Next time you're stopped at a railroad crossing, listen to the diesel engine and listen for the music in that.
And the patterns.
And you can feel it because it's a big thing. But yeah, there is music in anything you want music to be in.
And I think it liberates even the non-quote artist, the person that does not play an instrument, to be able to discover new solutions to things that they may not been able to tap into. And again, this is kind of my indictment of our society and its overemphasis on the analytical side of our brain. Once again, mention a name associated a lot of times with Miles Davis is Gil Evans. He was the arranger on Sketches of Spain, right? Well, what not a lot of people realize that Gil Evans had a period of time later in his life, actually not long before he died, where he was taking arrangements from Jimi Hendrix and putting them into a big band type of orchestral situation, right? And you could say, well, yeah, that's because he's Gil Evans. But my point is, that's a new pathway.
Absolutely.
And what discovery do we find when we go down a new pathway?
Absolutely.
And I think I'm going to draw it back to the societal thing and about how open are we to something different. And we'll be back to the episode after this. Jeff, What is the SEQ Development Report?
I'm glad you asked me that, Eric. The SEQ Development Report is something that we here at Spirit of EQ have developed to blend the idea of emotional intelligence with a person's spiritual life. And we're not talking about religion, we're talking about how they connect with themselves, other people, and the world around them.
Why is it important?
I think it's important because it allows someone to see where they stand, to give them information about maybe parts of their life they may need to work on, parts of their life that they're really doing well and learn to leverage it. And it just gives a person a better way of getting through the world.
So how do you get this report?
Well, first, you need to contact us.
Mm-hmm.
Info at Spirit of EQ is just a great way to do it. Then you would take an assessment, 15, 20 minutes, done online. And then after that, the report requires a debrief to go through all the things in it because it's got a ton of information. And then if you want to further your journey, we can do coaching and things like that with you down the road. And that's basically it.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. And now back to the episode.
So, okay, I want to share a conversation that I had about a week ago. So there was an article that I found. I was up late one night, and I'll send it to you so you all can put it in the
show notes.
The show notes.
Yeah.
And it was about this university, South Dakota Mines University, MINES.
Mm-hmm.
It was a mining university originally when it opened. It is a prestigious engineering university now. And I mean, the people come out of there, go to DARPA and Garmin and Google. They go to all the, it's big.
Yeah.
So the article was about how this is an engineering college, right? 2,500 students. Okay, I should say STEM university. 2,500 students. I want to say a quarter of the school is in the music program. Music is not a major at the university, but they have music groups, ensembles, choir, the whole bit, because the engineers needed to express through the music so that they could further be creative on the innovation side. Can you imagine? Yeah. They're not proficient musicians. Proficiency is not even the goal, but they need to experience, learn, and try to get as good as they can so that they're using that as a tool to foster creativity in what it is that they're doing. Mind blown.
Yeah.
So I called the head of the music department, and we got on a Zoom for like an hour, and it was like me and you. We sat down. I mean, we got on this Zoom call. I never met Dr. Armstrong in my life, and we talked for an hour straight, like we'd known each other for 20 years. And it's just like boom, boom, boom. All this. We were just firing, and the idea is, that's a new path. And I'm like, yes.
Could you imagine how sterile this will be without music?
Without music, yes.
It would just be horrible.
Horrible. Yeah, I agree.
I almost think, Stephanie, and this may sound a little radical, but it seems like your organization should be brought in whenever there's a tackling of an issue. And here's my point. As everybody knows, Columbus is exploding in its growth. Population, industry, fill in the blank. And housing stock, affordable housing, is constantly being talked about. It would seem to me that would be a good place to start, to have a Tribe for Jazz, a seat at the table, to sort of till the ground and prepare the ground for the work necessary to come up with the solutions. And that's a plug, by the way. You should do that.
I really, know. My mind is already. My brain is already. Yeah.
Because all the things that we're talking about here, affordable housing is not a new problem for Columbus or any other city in the United States, right? And obviously, and you can tell this if you read the news or other, social media or whatever, there's a level of frustration that, quote unquote, we haven't solved the issue, or we're not moving it close enough, or doing more for that. In my mind, okay, if what you have been doing has not been showing a breakthrough,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you need to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe jazz, and by extension, a tribe for jazz in Columbus, Ohio, is to use that to help create something new, a new direction, a new idea.
I just had a weird thought, but I think it's a good idea. We've all been in the corporate world, and we have retreats, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Team building retreats or this.
Yep.
What if it was just music? Maybe you're already doing that. I don't know.
No, but tell me more. I like that idea.
You know, you go away and you have a goal. You have things. You have activities that you do to do all this. You're all excited, and you go back to work on Monday after the retreat, and it's nothing's different. But what if you did what you're talking about during a weekend retreat for the leaders of a company?
Yeah, I
Just
could see that.
listening, yeah.
I could see that. I mean, I have my. I gotta be careful as I look over at our producer. And I think he's reading my mind right now.
I know where you're going to. I think,
but I'm gonna hold my fire, Jeff. I think that's a great idea, no doubt in my mind. Because again, if any entity, organization, or whatever is trying to solve a problem, trying to find, especially if it's one that they haven't got the kind of traction that they had desired. Why not? Mm-hmm. Why not pull you guys in and say, how could we, even if it's just to open the doors up?
Yep.
Because, Stephanie, I think about if I did not have that music playing, that Sketches of Spain, could I have still written the book? Of course. I don't think it would have been as good. I don't think it would have tapped into what I wanted to say. Right? The focus work now that maybe doesn't have anything to do with a book, but has something to do with having to get something accomplished and out to the world. Could I have done it without music, just done it in silence? Of course you could, but that's like saying it's good enough. It could be worse. I mean, all that kind of language, right?
Right.
So I guess I'm kind of back to this problem solving idea. What is when you go into whether it's education or nonprofit or corporate, and again, I don't know how much you're doing with corporate, but are there certain types of problems that they feel like they're trying to solve that they say, okay, this is what we're having an issue with, or is that the approach?
So I'm going to use, let's go into education. I'm going to use that as an example in our Jazz Lab program.
Yep.
So all I knew is that I wanted very much to present opportunities to young children to think differently. Okay, so I'm holding that close, this idea of, we know that a number of young children, especially those who may be from historically marginalized and underserved communities who may not have access to STEM or other programming or just these other opportunities that other kids are fortunate to have. They need an infusion of something different to shake them up, to get them to see the patterns and the interconnectivity in life and to think differently. And so that's like our approach, I think, in anywhere we're going to. And so it's about the music, and I'm going to lose my train of thought. It's about the music, but it's also about how musicians in jazz scenarios work together. And when you can strip all of that apart, you can come up with a certain set of not rules or parameters, but ideas of how you might interact to get the most out of someone, out of a team member, I'm talking from an organizational corporation standpoint. And these are skills that, like, everyone, regardless of age, needs to continue to foster. How to be a better collaborator, how to have more cohesion, how to be more authentically connected to other people, how to be adaptable, how to be an improviser, how to be more resilient. All of that, you can get that from the richness of this art form not only by the listening, but by thinking about how it's such an abstract idea. And I'm still working through how to explain it.
But you know what, though?
But there's so much there when you pull apart the processes from the music. It's just really, it's a rich space. And that's what we're just interested in exploring.
Well, and this is the part, warning, my indictment is coming, that really drives me crazy about our society in the United States, right? When we hear about things that are abstract, you know, reluctance, you know, I don't know if I want to go there. But if I said to that same person, I'm going to put you in the seat, the driver's seat of a BMW M5, and I want you just to drive it around the freeway system for a half hour, I bet you'll cut out of that car and you'll go, oh my gosh, that was unbelievable. And if my next question for you is, well, tell me, how does that engine operate? You can't tell me, but you knew it felt wonderful. I love how it handled. And when I did a turn, I didn't feel like I was gonna. You would be describing it in terms of emotion and how you felt and how it made you feel. You're not coming away going, well, let me tell you about a 6-cylinder versus an 8-cylinder and the oil compressors used. No, you're not.
I would, but
well, for those,
my dad was the same way. He would too. Yeah.
But in the end, and I think Jeff would even agree, even being a motorhead, there is something about the feel of the experience.
You put all the, even knowing all the technical stuff, when you put it together, that's where the abstract part comes in. The way it's doing what it's supposed to do.
And Jeff, going back to jazz, that was one of the things that a lot of these modal jazz players is that we're going to prepare and we're going to be as mastery over our instrument, and then we're going to let it happen. Right? And I've used this analogy, Stephanie, with clients, most of the time with individual clients, is that in the beginning, practicing emotional intelligence, right? The on-purpose, intentional practice of it will feel very clunky. It will feel like you're walking upstairs backwards, and you're not going to like it. There's going to be, the brain's going to resist the whole 9 yards. But I said, and I use him, I said, you're familiar with the quarterback, Joe Burrow, Cincinnati Bengals,
Yes.
right? Would you say he's a top quarterback? Most people say, yes, he's one of the best in the league. Well, I bet you anything, you could take it back to when he first picked up the football. It was clunky. It was, okay, Dad, what do I do when this happens? And then it's footwork, and then the gym, and then the lifting of weights. But eventually, Joe Burrow got to a point, and this was not all physical talent. He could get to the line of scrimmage, and in split-second nature, I know what I need to do because I know what they're showing me. Let's go. It's a rinse and repeat thing. But he's prepared. He's practiced.
That's right.
But when in the moment, there's not it's a football, and I've got to count to 3 and say hike. And once I say hike, I lift my right arm back. No. Right?
If you want to see a group of people doing what you're talking about, have you heard of the Isle of Man time trials, TT?
No, I've heard of that, but I don't know much about it.
It's the Isle of Man off the coast of England. Every year has these motorcycle races on a 25, 30-mile course.
Oh, my God. Is that the one that, like, for years they lost, like...
They still do every year.
They still lose people. Okay,
But
yeah.
watch those guys. They're taking this technical marvel of a motorcycle, but it's artistry with what they're doing.
Yeah.
200 miles an hour, going around a corner with, they don't have guardrails and soft things to hit.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and I know this has been, Malcolm Gladwell, right? He's most famous for the idea, I don't think he came up with it, but this idea of 10,000 hours to mastery. If you do something for 10,000 hours, you'll get your mastery. I think, yes, it is probably that, but I also think it's your brain's fabulous ability to build new neural pathways. And as you continue to practice it and continue to do it, it becomes effortless.
Mm-hmm.
I also know, and for our audience, that Stephanie is a photographer extraordinaire. And I believe
I can't believe you told him that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm
All right.
teasing, I'm
But
teasing.
I gotta believe. If I'm not, my memory serves, that's where you kind of got your start. That's what you were focused in on, was photography, right?
For 20 years.
Okay.
Been a photographer,
Okay.
creative director.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're called to do a photo shoot, I got to believe it's somewhat effortless. I know you're prepared. I know that you explain what we're going to do and how we're going to do it and where we're going to do it. But when it begins to shoot, you get into your mode.
There's a rhythm.
There's a rhythm, right? Mm-hmm. And for those out there who are the analytical, I mean, if you're an engineer or if you're an accountant, and I don't say that as a blanket statement, but if you're someone that has really gone, I haven't really explored that. All I'm advocating here is, why don't you be open to another part of your brain to maybe make what you're doing now even better, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense.
No, it does.
So, Stephanie,
Eric.
Change. I don't know of anyone that likes it, because we all kind of like things to go as we want them to go. I kind of joked with a friend not too long ago. I was like, if we're really honest, I just want everybody to do what I want them to do, when I want them to do it, and how I want it done. If we could just get that, then I'd be happy, right?
I think the same thing.
Right? And for us, the two of us, there's Stephanie and there's Brett and there's a million people. That's what we really want. But the reality is, sometimes life comes and knocks on the door and says, what you knew before is no longer going to be.
That's right.
Do you find that, whether, again, it's not just jazz, the art form, it could be jazz, the science, can it help with navigating change? Do you think that?
100%. 100%. So, like, going back to this idea of how, like, I try to live my life.
Right.
And I have not finalized my thoughts around what jazz thinking is. Okay, I'm not ready to like go there today.
Yeah.
But I think there's a method.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a method. If you allow yourself to see, I don't want to like say that you all are controlling, but there is a level of control that you like to have, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, certainly.
And everyone does over certain things. I work more towards relinquishing it.
Ooh.
I'm interested in possibilities, not. I'm interested in possibilities, not things that are a foregone conclusion. I want to. I don't know. But that's just the way I approach a lot of things. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay.
And this is in light of, I would imagine, and I know what you think. Some people have a greater ease of that than others, right?
A risk tolerance, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll put it into an example. So with our Jazz Lab program, there was a thought that was that catalyst, right? And I just started building off of there and then finding thought partners and getting all the inputs. And I'm constantly seeking inputs, but moving while, seeking all the inputs. But I leave a lot of room for a project or a product or a program or whatever it is to tell us what it is. And let the forces kind of like, you need the people to tell you what it is. You need whatever that feedback and input is, and just even timing. Because sometimes there's, there are great ideas that have manifested in the world. The timing was all wrong.
Yep.
There are, and I love this because there are musicians and albums that were ahead of their time. I think about Digable Planets. When Digable Planet, do you know who Digable Planets was?
No.
Oh my God! So this would have been like, okay, I'll send you some references. But anyway, when they dropped, they were an incredibly different type of music for that particular time frame. This was in the 90s. And but I argue that they were ahead of their time. They kind of like, went a little bit more into obscurity, or you can just any
Oh,
band
so many
that's
examples.
so many examples of that.
Yeah.
Ahead of their time. So I don't even know where I was going with that, but yeah.
No, that's good. And I guess what I'm thinking about going back to change and about looking for possibilities and things like that. And I know, again, everybody has that different level of risk tolerance, right? However, I would say to anyone, find something of that and employ that into how you operate daily.
Mm-hmm.
Because the interesting thing for me with change, and 2024 has been that year, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I locked into fighting what was coming my way, I found that I kept moving backwards.
Backwards, of course.
And the more that I fought it's the more I'm moving backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And this was kind of the art for me about this idea. Well, why don't you just let go? Stop fighting the current. Stop fighting the tide. Stop fighting the wind. Why don't you adjust your position so that you can go with that? And I truly understand, Stephanie. I get it. When that change is something that turns everything upside down, you should feel like this sucks. You should feel I don't like it. Never would rob anyone from feeling that. We're talking about what are we going to do after we have acknowledged that I feel that way. When we, at least for me, when I was fighting for control, how can I position things so that it's not going to be as painful? How can I do things so that maybe this won't happen? Is that, again, I'm moving backwards.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm going with it. And my hope for people, right, is that they have these tools available to them that can actually help them. And if we can separate this idea between, no one says you have to like the situation. No one says you have to like your boss. No one says you have to like the company. No one says you have to like the neighborhood, the city. That's okay. You can not like it. But what we're, again, talking about is how do you navigate? Because if it's moving you backwards, you got problems.
I think there are multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
I love your example of surrendering.
Yeah.
Surrender to it.
Yep.
We didn't talk about this at all really into this last minute, and I know we're about to wrap up, but I'm a very spiritual person, so that resonates a lot with me. But what also resonates too is this idea of the push through the sludge, the pushing through, knowing you're not alone, but the pushing through is a shaping type of, I don't know, there's something. Because as you were saying that, I was like, oh no, but there's something so interesting about the deep, whatever that is, and that heavy step, one after another, of pushing through. Again, for me, from a spiritual standpoint, it's hard, but there's a transformation that's happening through that too. I think multiple tools for different situations, personalities.
Yep.
But I want to offer that as well.
That's great. And again,
head down into the wind.
Type
of
I
heavy
totally get that.
Push through. There's something, and I'm a very visual person, so I think about when I see it in movies. Like you see, like maybe like the film, like dog sleds, and they're out there in the snow and they're facing the cold and they're bracing, and and you're pushing through. There's something really powerful about that imagery.
Well,
Yeah,
you're really spot on, and this is why I think, and Jeff, we've talked about it on the show before. This idea of non-dualistic thinking can be so valuable because, to your point, Stephanie, and you know this because we know each other outside of a podcast interview. My son was in a very serious car accident a couple months ago, and I remember after, I don't remember how many surgeries he had, but this was one of the bigger ones, and we're sitting in the ICU, and I'm looking at him, and obviously he's in a lot of pain and all of that comes with that. And in those moments when you're going, I want to say something, but I don't know what to say. I don't know if I should, you're kind of debating, having that debate in your head. And I think it was a God thing that said, just let him know that you don't know. Mm-hmm. And I said to him, I can't imagine how much pain you're in right now and how hard this is. But I do know that progress compounds like money. Thank you, Bill Ackman, wherever you may be. Progress compounds like money. It increases over time. And when you're talking about the pushing through and the head into the wind, the sleigh, I liken it to that. It's like we just have to go another quarter of a mile, and then we'll take a break. And then we're going to go another quarter of a mile. And then we're going to go another quarter.
You're going to make me cry.
Well, that's okay. Crying is allowed here on this podcast, right?
But that's it, though.
Right, yeah, because...
Can you go one step further than
just
you did?
Just one more.
One more.
Yeah, so if today you did 3, okay, tomorrow let's try to do 4. And then when we do 4, we can move to 5. I have found in this time that doing that has also increased my surrender.
Oh, that's good.
Right? And obviously we're talking about the deep and the valley type stuff.
Yeah.
But this also applies to the idea that Jeff has about this particular thing for the podcast. If we sit here, right, and think of it in terms of this giant thing that you just want to do, we're going to probably sink.
Yep.
But if we can kind of pivot to, okay, Jeff, what could we do this week? Well, I could call this person and you could reach out to that person. And then maybe when we get with Brett, we can, okay, great. That's good. I think far too often in our culture, there's this, how do we get to the mountaintop? How do we get to the mountaintop?
Much of that.
Right?
So much of that.
And we forget. Sorry, that's not reality.
Yeah.
It may sound great on social media. It may look great on social media, but that's not how.
Like we've talked about this before, going on a motorcycle trip. Destination's not important.
Right.
It's the getting there.
Yeah.
Right.
Stephanie,
Eric.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh my gosh, this was wonderful.
We
could have kept going. That was wonderful.
And we will,
it was
because
good. It was really good.
See, that's another thing we don't tell guests, is that if you think this is the last time you're going to be on the show, I'll be reaching out.
This is really wonderful. This is wonderful.
Yeah, it is, and we really appreciate it. And audience, we're so glad that you tuned in as well, and we look forward to the next time that we're together. Take care. Hi, everyone. This is Eric Pennington with the Spirit of EQ. I'm not introducing a new episode today. I'm here to tell you some things that might help you. Jeff, you're with me as always. So
yes.
How do people get in touch with us?
Well, the best way is just send us an email at info@spiritofeq.com.
That's awesome. Jeff, I was also thinking about reviews, and I'm notoriously bad at asking for them, so reviews on all of the platforms wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes.
Do you think that'd be good?
I think that would be great because, one, that will help us learn how to make better ones. And it's always good for us.
So we're not the perfect podcast hosts?
We're close.
Okay, all right. But
not,
still,
not totally
we want
perfect.
your feedback.
But it also might let us know a new subject. Hey, we need to dig deeper into that.
Yeah.
So let us know what you think.
Cool. We really appreciate that. As always, too, there is social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we also have a YouTube channel. Those also have mechanisms or options for you to be able to leave a comment, a like, or those kind of things. Just want to make sure that you know how to get in touch with us. Right, Jeff?
Right. We appreciate you all.
Thank you. Once again, we really appreciate you tuning in today. One of the things that Jeff and I want to bring to your attention as well is that when we created this podcast, it was not intended to take the place of a clinician. In other words, if you find yourself in a place where there's something deeper going on or something that you cannot solve on your own, we do recommend that you reach out to a clinician of some sort. This podcast is purely opinion-based, and it is rooted in the desire to help you along your path in whatever way we can. However, it is never going to replace, nor should it ever be looked at as a replacement for clinical help in any way. Thanks again for tuning in.